how to build arrows. In the last video, I spine indexed all of these arrows in the process of building them. So if you want to see how to spine index an arrow, make sure you watch that video. In this video, I'm going to completely build the rest of the arrow. That's going to involve cutting it to length, inserting or gluing in the insert, and then gluing on the fletching. So what I'm going to do here in this step is cut the arrow to length. And I do have a arrow cutting set up here. It's recommended to use something like this in order to get a nice clean cut. So I already have my length set here. I'm going to cut off 1 inch because I have a fairly long draw length, and I've set my end here there's a screw on the back to set that. And what I'm going to do is take this outside because it's going to create a lot of dust and carbon dust. Also going to wear a respirator because you don't want to breathe that carbon dust in. I'm going to turn on the saw, and then I'm going to hold the arrow against this and rotate it to get a clean cut. I'm going to do that for every arrow, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, for protective gear, I've got an N95 mask. So I'm going to put that on here. And goggles. Next thing I like to do is glue in the inserts, and these are a very thin diameter arrow for hunting, so I cannot fit a Q-tip up there into the shaft. So I'm just cutting a piece of paper towel, and this is acetone, 100% acetone, basically nail polish remover. And I'll try to get this paper towel, it's a little bit too thick. I'm going to get this paper towel in there and just kind of twist it around to get all of that carbon dust out so that I get a good adhesion with the insert glue. Just working it down in there and twisting it. You want to make sure you get it in past where the insert's going to go to. So you want to get it in deeper than the length of the insert. Pull it out, and there is some carbon dust on the end of this. Let me show you. So at this phase, I'm going to just do that for all of the arrows, and then I'll get my insert glue and glue in the inserts. Okay, I'm ready to glue in the inserts. I actually couldn't find my good insert glue, so I went and got some more and got a haircut in the meantime. So I'm going to glue this into, these have a 2-stage insert system. One is an internal piece that the field point or broadhead will screw into, and then an external collar that slips over the outside. And you do not need to glue on the external collar. Fits on very snugly. And in addition to fitting on snugly, the field point or broadhead, when it's screwed in, will hold that in place. So I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on. Now when I'm gluing in an insert, this end's going to go in first. I like to put a little bit of glue on this end and a little bit up. And as I put it in, I'm going to twist the insert to try to get glue 360 degrees around the inside of the shaft. And as you push it in, the glue that's down here is going to also slide up the insert itself. Get it started in there, twisting it I like to twist it a lot on the way in. And then I have a paper towel here to get the excess off the outside. Now for this, it says to hold it in for 15 seconds, but it's not going anywhere, so don't technically need to hold it. So there's one insert. I'm going to let that dry before I slide the sleeve on. Now let me zoom in and give you an up-close look at gluing in one of these inserts. All right. So I'm going to put it over on this end. I'm rotating the arrow shaft, twisting the arrow shaft as I'm doing this, just to get good coverage as I push it on and in. And I'm using this paper towel, I'm just twisting it on that to get the excess off the outside, and that is how I'm doing that. I've got the internal inserts glued in. Now I'm going to just slide the sleeve over. It's just a matter of sliding this on. Now you may notice I have 8 of the arrows laying this way and 4 that way. When I spine indexed the arrows, those 4 had a noticeably weaker spine than these 8. And so I intentionally set those aside so that I can monitor if that changes the way that they fly off the bow. So I'll be able to tell based on having spine indexed the arrows, and that'll help me know if these fly differently. I'll probably just use them with field points for practice, because when you get broadheads on there, it can really change things. So the purpose of the sleeve, at least in my opinion, is a larger diameter than the shaft of the arrow. Since I'm using this for hunting, this enhances your penetration because you have a larger hole being made with the broadhead and this insert, and with a smaller diameter here, there's less friction because the hole is larger than the diameter of the shaft of the arrow. So that's kind of what the purpose of something like that is. You also have to be careful if you're using an outsert like this. When you're cutting the arrows to length, make sure that the outsert is not going to be coming in contact with your arrow rest. So now I'm going to put these sleeves on all of the arrows, and when I get that done, I'm actually going to shoot a bare shaft into the target to see which way the arrow naturally spins off of the bow, which is going to determine what direction helical fletch I'm going to put on. So if the arrow naturally spins, now for me it's counterclockwise, for you I'm making a clockwise rotation, but if the arrow spins in a counterclockwise rotation, I'm going to put a left helical curve, and that's just going to work with the arrow what it naturally wants to do. And what I have found is it depends on which direction the bowstring has been twisted, actually makes a difference on which way the arrow naturally spins when it comes off the bow. On the nock, there is a little tab that sticks out of every nock, so I always face that away from the riser, and that way you can feel like if you're hunting and you see an animal, you can feel that little tab on the nock, and without looking at it, you can knock it on in the correct direction. That's the purpose of that little tab. You take note of that little tab when you put the bare shaft on your bow. You make a shot from just maybe 5 feet away from the target. It is going to rotate as it comes off the bow, but by only being 5 feet away, it's not going to rotate a lot. So if my tab is facing down, I know that it rotated for me counterclockwise, so I'm going to put a left helical. If my tab is facing kind of up, I know that the arrow was naturally rotating for me in a clockwise direction. I'll put a right helical. So that's our next step in the arrow building process. All right, for actually fletching the arrow, I shot the arrow out of the bow and I got a counterclockwise twist I actually shot it from about 5 feet away, and it didn't really give me enough twist to be able to tell. So I went back to about maybe 10 feet, and I definitely had some counterclockwise rotation, which means I'm going to put a left helical curve. If you don't put the helical in the direction the arrow naturally wants to spin, it's going to come off the bow naturally wanting to go the one way, and then your helical curve on your fletch will kick in, and it just takes the arrow longer to stabilize. It's going to be fighting against itself a little bit. So my particular jig here, if you're going to be wondering what it is, this is made by Last Chance Archery. It's a very precise jig. There's all kinds of jigs out there. I test fit the fletch on here already, pushed it up against the arrow, made sure everything was contacting it as it needs to. And another thing, each jig is going to be different. This one has markings on it to help me make sure that I put the vane at the same location in the jig for each one so that they all line up properly. One thing I like to do is, this is a little primer. It's essentially, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the same as this, which is like an acetone. It's a cleaner. And acetone also kind of, it softens up the plastic or rubber. So you got to kind of be a little careful with it, because you don't want to put too much on there. I'm actually going to give that a second to dry, and in the meantime I'm going to prep the other two vanes for this arrow, because I do 3 vane configuration on all of my arrows. So a lot of times I'll just do, while I'm letting those kind of dry, I'll just do the next set as well. Kind of trying to be a little bit efficient with my time. One thing you want to make sure is that you want to not touch the arrow shaft with your fingers as much as possible. You don't want the greases from your fingers getting on there. It could interfere with the adhesion of the glue. So now I have my fletch tight here. Alright, so when you're putting your glue on, I like to, actually, where's my paper towel from earlier? I like to make sure that the glue is 100% in contact with the face of the vane that's going to be glued to the arrow. Another thing I'll mention too is my spined index mark. I made sure I rotated the arrow so the center of the index mark is going to run through the center of the helical. So let's say the helical starts here and curves over and ends here. I'm running my spine of the arrow right through the middle of that. And as I was saying, I like to make sure I have complete coverage. If it means I have a little excess glue that I have to wipe off, fine. But I just would rather have 100% coverage on this vane than having air pockets in there, because that's how your vanes get ripped off more easily. So I put a little bead on it all the way down. I'm not squeezing any more out now. I'm actually using the tip of this to kind of make sure it's fully covered and I don't have air pockets in there. I'm not squeezing right now. I'm just kind of spreading it using the tip. The way this bottle is, I kind of have to squeeze in order to get the glue to come out. Not all of them will be like that though. So I've got my jig here. I'm going to go ahead and push it on, and I like to hold the arrow beyond where the vanes will come in contact with it, so that, again, the oils from my fingers are not going to be touching the arrow shaft where the glue will be. And I like to hold it firmly in place for about 30 seconds. Try to get that initial glue set. And then once you have that initial set, you can remove this jig piece here. You'll be able to tell if you didn't wait long enough, because when you go to remove this jig piece, the fletch will not slide out of it. So if it has adhered to the arrow shaft sufficiently enough, when you go to pull this off, the fletch will stay in place. like that. So there's one, and then I actually just rotate this till it clicks like that, and then I'll put the next fletch in. One thing I like to do after each one is applied is just, you know, make sure there's no excess glue on there. I'll take my paper towel and just kind of run it down on both sides if there's any excess glue, just trying to, you know, pick that up. Alright, so I already primed this next one. I'm trying to be careful to not touch this part with my fingers as much as possible. So in order to not touch that, I'm just, the way this one's designed, I can actually pull down on the vein to pull it all the way down into the jig. Alright, let me zoom in on this for you so you can kind of watch a little bit more up close. Okay, so I'm just going to apply the glue here. Okay, got a nice coating on there. Put this onto the jig, up against the arrow. Sorry that my hand's kind of blocking you, but I'm just pinching toward the arrow shaft, and I'll hold that for about 30 seconds before I remove the jig part that's holding the vein. All right. One thing I like to do is put a dab of glue on the front of the fletch, and that helps it, if it goes into a target, having that little dab of glue there kind of helps it from getting ripped up or pulled up. So I'll put that on there, let that dry, and then move on to the next. Okay, while I'm gluing on these fletches, I just want to show you a couple other things. This is the arrows that I had used before. This is a 3-inch vein. The ones I'm gluing on now are 3.5 inch, so you can see they're longer. And they're also, this arrow from before is a different spine than this one. So I want to differentiate. And I draw a little cross on my fletching just to remind me of Jesus, you know, the cross of Christ. The reason why I use all white fletching is because I make hunting videos, and all white shows up better on video than different colors. So that's why I do that. So to mark my index vein, I usually do that, but to help me differentiate so I don't mix up these arrows by accident, I'm going to do something different for these. I'm going to put 3 dots, one for the Father, one for the Son, one for the Holy Spirit. So these arrows are going to have 3 dots on them, and that'll help remind me of the Trinity. I'm going to put it on both sides. And so these arrows are going to have 3 dots to indicate the index fletch. And I also wanted to mention this. This is a different arrow. It's a heavy or a larger diameter arrow. but this is for a different bow. And I already stripped off the old fletch because the old fletch had gotten messed up. So if you're ever in that situation, the best tool that I've found is just a dull utility knife blade. So you can see this was used for cutting drywall, and it's very dull at this point. And so the reason why you want dull is you don't want to actually have the knife or the blade go into the carbon. You're basically just scratching off the fletch and the glue. So you just kind of run it back and forth, scratch off the fletch. Then you take some acetone. I usually just put it on a paper towel and then I run it back and forth over the arrow to get all the excess dust and stuff off so that you have good adhesion with your glue. And then you'll glue on your veins in the same way that you do for, any other fletching. If you're making a new arrow or fletching new old ones, those are just a couple things I wanted to throw in there as far as my arrow build. Hey folks, this is a few days later and I'm editing and I realized I never really gave you a closing. So I hope that this video has helped. If you want to see the spine index video or even what is spine, I have made videos on that. I'll provide a little link at the end of this video for you to go check those out if you want. If not, I got plenty of archery or bow tuning videos and everything like that on my channel. I'd love for you to check those out as well. Thanks for tuning into this video. I hope it was helpful. Until next time, take care and God bless.